All right, we're still going strong on our week of Pitt football talk. What do we have on Monday? We had 5 players we're not talking about enough, right? And then yesterday we had the 5 position battles to watch. Today it's 5 breakout candidates. And this is not going to be the same, sort of thing as the 5 players we're not talking about enough. This will be a different list. I don't think I have any overlap with that list, but it's different. It'll be a different kind of list and different players we're watching. Guys who I think are going to be pretty important, who I would say, I don't know. I was going to say, how many of these 5 are going to be in the starting lineup. It might only be 1 or 2, honestly. But I still think these are going to be 5 very important players who are going to be on the field a lot. They're going to make big plays for Pitt. They're going to make a lot of plays and be a pretty big part of what Pitt does this season. And so 5 players on the verge of breakout. My 5 breakout candidates for you. And then an observation about something that sort of emerged here as I put this list together. I got done and I looked at it and I said, that's weird. So 5 breakout players and 1 weird trend about those 5 guys here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com here on a Wednesday. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you for a little bit of Pitt sports talk, a little Pitt football talk. We do it all the time at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfer portal, Pitt everything. You find it at Panther-Lair.com on the 247 Sports Network. So if you're a Pitt fan, you want to hang out and read about Pitt sports and talk to other Pitt fans and get involved in the conversation, the place to do it is at Panther-Lair.com. Best online community of Pitt sports fans that you're going to find right there on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And I think some great content as well. But, of course, I'm a little bit biased on that. You know what we do here? It's our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week. We have our weekly live show, which is usually Wednesday nights, but we're not doing it tonight due to some scheduling conflicts for me. So we did our live show last night at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It was a bit of a change in schedule, but if you want to make sure you don't miss anything, if you want to make sure that those changes in schedule don't catch you off guard, the thing to do is like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you subscribe, you can turn on notifications. You turn on notifications, you can get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live or post new videos. And so if we change up our schedule like we did this week, and I think there's another one coming up in a couple weeks where I have something going on a Wednesday night, so we'll have to switch the schedule around there. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry, I missed the message, or I didn't know, or I didn't see a tweet about it, or whatever it might be. You'll just get an alert when we go live. You'll get a notification. Subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, 5 guys who are going to break out this year. My top 5 breakout candidates for Pitt football in 2025, and I'll start with an obvious one because he was the Ed Conway Award winner for Most Improved Player on Defense, and it's Shadarian Harrison, redshirt sophomore cornerback from Florida. And the thing I always remember about Shadarian Harrison, I knew the Pitt coaching staff was really high on him when he signed. And I can remember on signing day, I guess it would be about 3 years ago now, Pat Narduzzi said that, Shadarian Harrison, they really liked him a lot. They thought he was one of the best cornerback prospects in the country. He had a teammate who was rated as one of the best cornerback prospects in the country, but they thought Harrison was better. This is what Pat Narduzzi said. Now, he never named that teammate, but it was Cormani McLean. The 5-star cornerback prospect, finished as a top 15 prospect in the nation in that recruiting class of 2023, I guess it was. Finished as a top 15 overall prospect, number 1 or number 2 cornerback prospect in the country, one of the top 2 overall recruits in the state of Florida, which if you're number 1 or number 2 recruit in the state of Florida, you're pretty good. McLean went to Colorado, played like 9 games, transferred to Florida last year, and played a handful of games in redshirt. It hasn't done a whole lot, but coming out of high school, he was viewed as the next big thing. And Pat Narduzzi, sort of unprovoked and without reason, I don't know if he took a shot at Cormani McLean as much as he was trying to praise Shadarian Harrison, that they felt like Harrison was a better prospect than his teammate. Lofty praise, and high words. And ultimately, Shadarian Harrison hasn't done much over the last 2 seasons, largely because he's been dealing with injuries. The injuries kept him out his freshman year. I think he was injured last year during spring camp. That slowed him down. Now he's healthy. He's ready to go and came out and had a great spring camp. Made a lot of plays, forced a lot of turnovers, had some big plays in the spring game, was named, like I said, the most improved player on defense. And I think, we talked yesterday about the position battles, and I talked about the cornerback spot, and you've got these two veteran guys coming back in Rashad Battle and Tamon Lynham. I give Shadarian Harrison every bit the same likelihood of winning a starting job as I would give one of those two guys. I don't know who the two favorites are right now to be the starting corners at Pitt, but I'm not keeping Shadarian Harrison out of that conversation. I think he's really talented. I think he's got a chance to be one of the most talented cornerbacks they've had at Pitt under Pat Narduzzi, and maybe the most talented cornerback at Pitt. Look, he pops up on the screen, making an interception right there early in the spring game. Perfect timing on that photo to rotate through the slideshow. Is this a case of me overhyping a guy? Probably. Does Shadarian Harrison have a chance to reach these lofty expectations I'm setting for him? Yeah, I think he does. I think he can be that good. He's big, he's athletic, he's got length. And, it's you see some of the physical traits. The length reminds you of Dane Jackson. The athleticism reminds you of Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis. We need to see him out there in coverage, in games. And look, there are going to be games where, Harrison is going to play a lot this season, right? And there are going to be games when he's on the field when he gets beat. Because everybody gets beat in this defense. Like, this is the nature of the beast. When you're playing cornerback in Pat Narduzzi's defense, you're going to get beat. Right, you're going to give up plays. That happens. But the best corners that Narduzzi has had have been the guys that they got beat, but they also just completely locked it down and didn't get many targets thrown their way. And so Dane Jackson, Damari Mathis, Jason Pinnock, all did a really good job. Marquez Williams, MJ Devonshire, AJ Woods was a solid guy. He pops up on the screen every now and then. Avonte Maddox was put in a tough position because he wasn't really recruited to play in this defense, but he made the best of it and turned it into an NFL career. There's AJ Woods. Pitt has had good corners. I think Shadarian Harrison has a chance to be every bit as good as any of those guys. And I think he's got a lot of those traits that you like seeing, and certainly that the Pitt coaches like seeing. And I think he's going to be a guy. My prediction would be this. Shadarian Harrison will be one of those guys who at the end of next season, at the end of the 2025 season, we're talking about, wow, can they keep him? Can they hold on to him? Can they come up with an NIL deal that keeps him in place? Because I think he's going to be a targeted guy, a coveted guy. He might have been already this offseason. It might have been this spring. The downside of the Ed Conway Award is you draw more attention to a guy, although I think sometimes the whole drawing attention thing is overblown. Because I think coaches will find out who's good and efforts will be made to poach those guys. But I think Shadarian Harrison will be a guy that we talk about in the in the postseason, kind of like we've talked about. In December we talked about Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, and Desmond Reed, and Eli Holstein, and Kenny Johnson. Then here we are in the spring talking about Kenny Johnson again. Every year there's a handful of guys you're like, wow, if they can hold on to them, they're going to be in good shape. Well, I think Shadarian Harrison's going to be that guy for Pitt after this season. And if he doesn't start the season open the season as a starter, I should say, I think he'll be a starter at some point during the year. I think he can be that good. Another guy that I probably feel a little bit more confident about being in the starting lineup, but would still merit, I still think can have a breakout season. And it might be a funny option to mention, but I think Cruz Brookens is poised for a breakout season. And I say that I think it might be funny because I feel like we've talked about Cruz Brookens a ton over the last 2 years. Dating back to when he showed up in spring camp last year and then what he did in training camp. He has been a camp hero for 3 camps in a row now, 2 spring camps and a training camp. Last season, he got on the field as the extra defensive back, in the what do they call it? Oh, the Delta defensive package, right? He got on the field in the Delta defensive package as that extra defensive back, played a lot that way and made some plays. I think he'll move into a starting role in the base defense this year, and it'll give him more opportunities depending on whether he plays the boundary safety or the field safety. The field safety is going to have more opportunities downfield. The boundary safety is staying closer to the line of scrimmage, staying in the box. Donovan McMillan didn't put up much in the way of interceptions, and it's largely because of sort of how that position worked. But I think Cruz Brookens, the thing about him, and we've seen this since he arrived at Pitt. We've seen this since he got here. He has just made plays. Some guys just have a knack for making plays. And I tend to shy away from those sort of vague, intangible things. Some guys just show up on game day. Some guys do this. Some guys but the reality is, if you can make plays, you're making plays. You know what I mean? If you're making plays, you're making plays. It's as simple as that. And when they have these things in practice where, the guys walk out of training camp with all the takeaway stickers on their helmet, you're not faking that. You know what I mean? You're not making that up. That's a real thing. You are making plays, particularly as a defensive player, and particularly as a defensive back. You're getting your hands on the football. And, that's the name of the game. That's how you win. We always talk about Pat Narduzzi and all the emphasis he places on turnovers because there's a pretty strong correlation between forcing turnovers and protecting the ball and winning. And Cruz Brookens is a guy who forces turnovers. And I think I have every reason to expect that to continue into the season. I expect him to make a lot of big plays and be really good in this defense and help this team win. And so even though we've been talking about him a lot, he played a decent amount last year, I still think he has a chance to have a breakout season and in 2025, and I expect him to. I think he'll be another guy that is, pretty high priority in terms of keeping in the offseason because he'll be a returning starter and one of the foundational pieces of this defense, along with Shadarian Harrison and a couple other guys that we're going to talk about right here. So I would put Cruz Brookens on that list as a breakout candidate this year. The next guy I would put here might be, I have to sort of contain myself on what I think the potential is here because I think there's a chance to be pretty exciting. I'm getting my paper out because usually I would have legal pad with all the stats on it, but my legal pad, I actually it's full. It's full. Double-sided, it's full. So I actually had to go to the store and buy new legal pads today, but I did this research before I went out and bought the new legal pads. So I have my information here. Next breakout candidate, Jaden Moore. Jaden Moore, defensive end, transferred in from Oregon. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school, but he went to Oregon. I think there's you have a certain respect for a guy who goes to Oregon and plays at Oregon. And he was in a backup role, a reserve role, didn't play a ton, but you account for sample size. And when you start looking at what some of his numbers are in the limited sample size, the limited playing time that he had last season, you start getting a little bit excited about what the potential could be. So Jaden Moore only had 70 pass rush snaps last year. We're gonna repeat that number a lot because it's relevant. It sets the context of the sample size. We're going to be comparing him against guys who had a lot more pass rush snaps and against guys that had fewer pass rush snaps. But it's relevant to consider. He only had 70 pass rush snaps, so everything's going to be kind of relative in that regard. But on those 70 pass rush snaps, he generated, and all these stats are going to be according to Pro Football Focus. All right, and we could go back and forth about Pro Football Focus and their grades. I'm not going to get into the grades today. This is just about sort of objective, hard data for the most part. 70 pass rush snaps. He generated 16 pressures. That was the 6th most of any Oregon defender last year, while he only played the 9th most pass rush snaps. So he outperformed his, sample, his volume, right? Now, I know that pass rush win rate is not something that the Steelers media is very fond of because it always seems to get used against TJ Watt, but I don't care about that. But let's just consider that number. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't, let's consider it relative to other players. Jaden Moore was 6th on Oregon's roster last year in pass rush win rate. But out of those 5 guys ahead of him, there's a sample size qualifier because out of those 5 guys ahead of him, 4 played fewer pass rush snaps than Jaden Moore. The only Oregon defender who had a higher pass rush win rate while playing more pass rush snaps than Jaden Moore last year was Derek Harmon, Steelers' first-round pick. That's the level that Jaden Moore seems to be. Pro Football Focus has this formula that combines sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times a player rushes the passer. If you look at all Big Ten edge defenders last season who had at least 70 pass rush snaps. Okay, so I it sounds like a lot of qualifiers trying to make a point by really isolating the sample, the data set, so it makes this player look good. But look, we'll just take all the Big Ten edge rushers who had at least 70 pass rush snaps. There's 75 guys who had at least 70 pass rush snaps of edge rushers in the Big Ten last year. Jaden Moore is second among those players in that PRP stat, the formula that combines sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times they rush the passer. If you look at Jaden Moore, so he had 16 pressures last season. That ranked among Big Ten edge rushers with at least 70 pass rush snaps, that ranked 41st, right? 16. But that's like a volume stat, right? If you compare the percentage of pass rushes that turned into pressures for Jaden Moore. Did I say he had 16 sacks or 16 pressures? He had 16 pressures. And if you look at some of the best edge rushers in the Big Ten last season, and you look at their total pass rushes and their pressures, right? So Mikhail Kamara from Indiana had 68 pressures on 406 pass rushes. That's 16.7% of the time. When 16% of his pass rush snaps turned into a pressure, according to Pro Football Focus. That's really good, right? And he led the Big Ten in pressures with 68. Abdul Carter from Penn State, second in the Big Ten in pressures with 66. He got a pressure on 18.9% of his pass rushes. 18.9. So almost 1 out of every 5 pass rushes, Abdul Carter got pressure on the quarterback. Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, Steelers draft pick, right? 64 pressures last season. Third most in the Big Ten among edge rushers. He had 380 pass rush snaps. So he got pressure on 16.8% of his pass rush snaps. Kamara, 16.7%. Carter, 18.9%. Sawyer, 16.8%. Jaden Moore got pressure on 22.9% of his pass rush snaps. Sample size, got to account for that. I mean, Kamara had 406 pass rush snaps. Carter had literally 5 times as many pass rush snaps as Jaden Moore. Sawyer had 380. And so, we're not going to say that, oh, look, Jaden Moore's better than all those guys. But on his limited sample size, which is still 70 pass rush snaps, it's not like he only had 5 and he got pressure on one of them, so his pass rush, rate is 20%. But on 70 pass rush snaps, he got pressured 23% of the time. Numbers that compare very favorably to some really, really good players. Kamara, Carter, Sawyer. And on down the list. I just stopped at those 3 because, I think if you can get numbers that, look favorable like that compared to those 3 guys, I don't need to go any further. I mean, there's a lot of good pass rushers and edge rushers in the Big Ten last year, and, we could go through all of them. And I think what you're going to find is that Jaden Moore's numbers stack up pretty favorably. Now, you're projecting, you're taking a guy who had a limited sample size and, you're saying, wow, look at what he did in that limited sample. It's not a guarantee that he's going to do that when he gets 300 pass rush snaps. You know what I mean? Like, you can't guarantee that his 16 will turn into 80 because he rushes the passer 5 times as much. And so I understand all of that. But I think what you have in Jaden Moore is the kind of guy Pitt should be going after. A guy who got, had limited work, rotational player, but was productive in his limited work, and bring him in, offer him an opportunity at a bigger role at Pitt. And that's what they've done with Jaden Moore. I think he's going to have a breakout season. I should have just done this episode on Jaden Moore because I have a list of names, and Jaden Moore is the only one that I came up with that much data on. But I'm probably going to come back to those numbers a lot. And I think we talked about it when he committed too as a transfer. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's got a chance to take what he did in a limited sample size and expand it over a bigger workload. And I think he might be pretty good. All right, next couple of guys. Let's get through these. I got 2 more breakout candidates and then one quick observation to wrap it up. My next breakout candidate is a guy who probably won't be in the starting lineup, but I think he's going to play a lot. He's going to be in a rotational role, and I think he's going to change the complexion of his position group, and it's Jeremiah Marcelin. I think Jeremiah Marcelin is going to be the backup middle linebacker behind Braylon Lovelace. I think he's going to play in a rotation with Lovelace. I think he's going to play a decent amount, spelling Lovelace and also giving Lovelace an opportunity to play outside to spell some of the other guys. I think Marcelin's going to be on the field for a healthy amount of snaps. I mean, you could look, Braylon Lovelace played a lot last year, although he was more as a rotational outside linebacker. But the opportunities are going to be there for Jeremiah Marcelin. The coaches raved about him this spring. He had a good spring camp by all accounts, and I think he's going to be really good. Honorable mention, shout out to Cam Lindsey, who I think is going to be in the rotation as well. But it's going to be a little bit tougher for Lindsey because he's behind Kyle Lewis, even though he's learning both outside linebacker spots. I mean, Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles are two of the best players on the team. So it's going to be a little bit tougher there. I still think Braylon Lovelace is really good, but I think Marcelin is going to get on the field and play quite a bit. I think he's going to have a breakout year. And we're going to go into next season thinking about Marcelin the way we think about, like Braylon Lovelace coming into this season. Although I don't know if Marcelin will put up quite the stat line that Lovelace did, because Lovelace actually had a great year last year, and I think he's only going to get better. But I think Marcelin's going to play a lot and produce. And then the last guy I would mention as a breakout candidate, and I cycled through about 3 or 4 different guys at this position before I settled on this one. I think it's going to be Isaiah Neal, Ghost. I think he's going to have a breakout year. I think he's been on the verge the last 2 years. I think he was on the verge last year, and I think this is going to be the year where he truly breaks through and has like a big season. You know what I mean? Like puts up an impressive number, 4 sacks, 5 sacks, something like that. I think Isaiah Neal can be what's the best way to say this? I think he plays with a lot of energy, and channeling that energy and managing that energy is going to be key for him, because if he can take all that energy he's got, and I think we've seen it at different times, and channel it into doing his job, executing the technique and executing the scheme, I think he could be really, really productive. And I thought, maybe Francis Brew, maybe it's Jasir Whittington, maybe Sean Fitzsimmons or Nick James. I mean, you could pick any of those defensive tackles. They all could be primed for a breakout year. But I'm going to go with Neal because I think he's going to be really good. I don't know if he's going to catch a touchdown this year, but maybe with a better throw, he will. So those are my 5 breakout players: Shadarian Harrison, Cruz Brookens, Jaden Moore, Jeremiah Marcelin, and Isaiah Neal. What's missing from that group? The offense. I wanted to pick an offensive breakout player. I was like, this will be like 3 defenders and 2 offensive guys. And I had Harrison, Brookens, and Moore written down. And I'm looking at the offensive guys, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just thinking more about Marcelin and Neal and guys like that than I am about any of these offensive players. So maybe we'll have to talk about that tomorrow, about why, I don't know, maybe it's just me that I'm just not feeling great about these individual players on offense. I think as a whole, the offense could be pretty solid. Maybe this is a whole versus the sum of its parts type of debate, but just not, I don't know. It doesn't, nobody really jumps off the page as a big breakout candidate other than maybe Kenny Johnson. But these 5 guys here, Harrison, Brookens, Moore, Marcelin, and Neal, I think they will have breakout years, even if they're not all in the starting lineup. And I think, Harrison could be, Brookens probably will be, Moore might be, but I wouldn't be surprised if he works off the bench. I think Neal and Marcelin will probably work off the bench, but I think they're all going to have breakout seasons and be a big part of the success Pitt has on defense this year. Let's talk about those offensive guys tomorrow, though. Try and figure out why there aren't any real offensive breakout players. Or maybe I'll just try and find some offensive breakout players. Today was going to be the whole team's breakout players, but it ended up just being defense. Let's see if maybe tomorrow we can get some offensive guys. All right, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you never miss any of our Pitt video content. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pitt sports site on the 247 Sports Network. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's been a lot of fun as always. I hope you've had a great start to your week. Enjoy your Wednesday. We're heading toward the end of the week, folks. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.